Good morning and welcome to How Business and Policy Move Together to Limit Global Warming to 1.5 degrees. My name is Nina Ekelund and I'm the Executive Director of the business network Haga Initiative. We organizers of the webinar are the business networks in Norway, Shift, Finland, Climate Leadership Coalition and the Swedish Haga Initiative. This project, Climate Neutral Nordics, is financed by the Nordic Council of Ministers. So let me introduce the first speaker that will welcome us this morning, Paula Lehtomäki, Secretary General of Nordic Council of Ministers. Please.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, dear friends. Happy New Year and warm welcome to the launch of the new report on Nordic CEO's view on raised climate ambitions. It is great that we all can start the new year by focusing on our common challenge and on what shall we do more in tackling climate change, both public and private sector together. The Nordic Council of Ministers is financing the making of this report for a second time. Last time, we could see how ambitious businesses encourage governments to proactively engage with the private sector in developing national climate action plans. The previous report also was instrumental in bringing forward the Nordic Prime Minister's declaration on carbon neutrality from 2019. Thus, we have good reasons to think that also this time the report can contribute to our work towards the vision of the Nordic region to become the most sustainable and integrated region of the world by 2030. The report at hand includes many interesting findings. It is encouraging that the Nordic businesses find effective carbon pricing as well as using public procurement as efficient policy instruments that would help develop and mature new markets. The report also clearly shows how important public and private cooperation and partnerships are to reach our ambitious goals. We need further develop this interaction. The private sector needs effective and long-term regulatory frameworks, and the public sector needs the financial and innovative power of the private sector. None of us can overcome the challenges ahead alone, not at the speed and scale we need. So we shall do this together. The work continues in the Nordic Council of Ministers as well. We follow up the 4 tracks seen also in this report, focusing on circular economy, skills development, innovative green technologies, and measurement of food and handprints. Our work will be based on a cross-sectoral, cross-silo, and cross-country approach. It will entail a series of both policy and practical hands-on dialogues and experience exchanges with politicians, experts, and other CEOs from the Nordic region. So, this report is not the end, but the beginning of the next phase of our common work. You are all welcome to join. With these remarks, I leave the floor to Dennis Putros from the Haga Initiative to further present the report and wish you all inspiring discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula Lehtomäki. And welcome to all looking at YouTube as well. We will hear Dennis Putros soon, but I first must say we have a fantastic panel of speakers. Ministers from 4 Nordic countries, CEOs from big, well-known companies in the Nordics, and also business networks from Norway, Finland, and Sweden. And of course, Denmark's minister was invited, but it's not always possible to find a date that works with everybody's calendar. So, during 2021, we interviewed CEOs from companies in the Nordics. The results show that the Nordic CEOs are very concerned about climate change and urge policymakers to raise their ambitions to ramp up climate action. It is evident that the Nordic companies can play a role delivering climate solutions worldwide and also help the customers and countries to align with the 1.5-degree target. And as Paula mentioned, the Nordic Council, the previous report, the Nordic Council Minister financed this report in 2018. And then business called on Nordic policy makers to be more ambitious in their climate targets and policy. Climate was important and in top 3 of the company's priorities. Contrastingly, this year's reports show that climate change is top priority. The ambition have increased the last 3 years. So let us hear about the report. Please, Denise Butros, Head of Communication at Haga Initiative. Please.
Thank you, Nina. Well, we have interviewed 40 CEOs and business leaders from big, well-known Nordic companies on their view on climate change mitigation, green recovery, and what they need from policy and other companies to spur their climate transition in the 2020s. This very broad report has gained several insights, but we would like to share some of them with you today, and the most promising ones. Starting with the most promising green technologies, the Nordic business leaders saw and mentioned wind power as the most promising one, especially mentioning offshore wind. Several of the business leaders also mentioned green hydrogen and carbon neutral steel as vital for the transition. Almost all responding companies are working with circularity, and they see this as a natural step to the 1.5-degree target. However, there are still obstacles that remain, which are both from the legislative side as well as economic, which make the transition towards a circular economy too costly to many companies still. We also know that the green transition will require a new set of skills in the labor market. What one insight gained from this report is that the same type of skills actually will be needed regardless of business sector. The Nordics are also in the front run of developing of handprints, which is the calculation of positive climate impact that a service or good has. And the Nordic companies can, by being transparent with their handprints, also increase the deliverance of climate solutions worldwide. Business leaders are asking policymakers for more collaboration and strong incentives. They are very clear about which type of incentives and policy they need. And the most preferred method was carbon pricing, either as a carbon tax or as an emission trading scheme. Other regulations and incentives that were mentioned also indicates strong and proactive governments and regulations on public procurement. To succeed with the climate transition and staying below 1.5 degree, we need more cooperation. Policymakers need to create a level playing field and also doing this very quickly. Speed is important in these urgent times. In conclusion, Nordic business leaders are gravely concerned about climate change and urge for climate action. They are very committed in decarbonizing their companies and can also play a key role in delivering climate solutions worldwide to help their customers and countries to stay below 1.5 degree. Nordic business leaders are not opponents to policymakers. They are, on the contrary, asking for more collaboration and for substantial incentives. Climate transformation spurs Nordic competitiveness and on global markets while also creating welfare societies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. And where can we find this report?
You will find this report on the Haga Initiative's website.
And also at the Nordic Council Ministers' website.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Denise Butros. So, please let me go over and hear the ministers. Here we can see the 4 Nordic ministers from Norway, Sweden, Finland and Iceland. Great to see you. And we will start with Espen Barth Eide, Minister of Climate and the Environment from Norway, and he's also this year the chair of the Nordic Council of Ministers. Please.
Well, thank you very much, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you today. I have read the report. I think it is extremely inspiring. You know, in the job that I have and share with my colleagues, sometimes you can get depressed in the morning when you read the latest IPCC report of how we're doing, but then I get an optimist again when I speak to people like the people in this gathering, because the business community, the CEOs, the owners, the investors, but also the employees, their consumers are now much more engaged and much more aware of the need to transition. And what makes me optimistic is not only the individual will to do it for my company or my sector, but the fact that when many people think about this together at the same time, it actually changes the market. And then it's becoming increasingly true that what's good for climate is also good for your wallet. It means that it actually makes sense in the economy to bring externalities in, like nature loss and climate emissions. And this wouldn't happen if I just did it, right? Or you just did it. But when we all do it, it starts a chain of events that really changes the economy. And right now, I think it's quite fair to say that Europe leads the world with this Green Deal and Fit for 55 and taxonomy, and the Nordics should lead Europe, because we can actually implement many of these things, so we can really be the leaders of the leaders in this massive change and this massive transition. And it's such, you know, it makes life of us politicians so much easier when we do not any longer have to start a meeting with the business community trying to convince them that the green shift is coming. It's quite on the contrary. You tell us, and we need to catch up with all the very correct and meaningful demands and claims on us, because I think what you're actually asking for is to make sure that we do our part to connect sectors, to make sure that infrastructure is there in time, to look into our laws and rules and regulations and incentive mechanisms to see if they are apt for the economy that you want to move into. So I think many people now in the Nordic business sector are mentally already in a future economy, which we collectively have to create. No, I mean, some years ago, it was climate activists and occasional politicians, those of us who cared, who tried to convince people about this. Now our job is very different. It's, in a sense, it's easier, but it's also more demanding, because we now actually have to deliver on the things we were hoping for. So the market is changing, and it makes sense. It's actually a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom. Just to take one very obvious example, a lot of companies in the Nordic community are thinking about cleaning up their process industry. That could be steel, as was mentioned, aluminium. Actually now, if you export to Europe, the ones who are first going from low emission to no emission will win much of the market, and the others will lose out. So whereas once upon a time in the old age, you would benefit from having high emissions because it was cheaper, you will now lose. And this comes around, right, in many different businesses. Another example I'd like to take, which we are very much engaged in, is the hydrogen economy. Everybody speaks about hydrogen. We used to say that hydrogen is the fuel of the future, and it will always be, because it was always like the vision of tomorrow. Now it might actually happen, but it requires that somebody invests in producing it, somebody invests in distributing it, and somebody invests in using it for industry and transport and so on. It doesn't make sense just to be in one part of that equation, because the whole thing has to fit together. And here is where I think government and government partnership with business can come in. So we are still a relatively new government in Norway. We have used our Nordic links to take experience from our friends in Denmark and Sweden and Finland and Iceland, of course. And we are now looking into what many countries already have developed with different names. Climate partnership with business, Fossilfritt Sverige. It has different names, but it's all about sitting down with relevant industries and saying, what can you do? What can we do? What can we change? What can you change? What are the missions or collective goals we want to achieve? And I think that what the climate, and I'll come to a conclusion soon, moderator, what the climate awareness does is that it restructures the relationship between the public sector and the private sector from where we were a few years ago. It has to, and it will do, and it should do. And then we should all be aware that we are, as you say, we want to create a level playing field. It should be open for all. We need to have a carbon pricing, carbon tax system that is fair and understandable. But my vision is that we want to make it more expensive to pollute, but also easier not to pollute. And so government has to be part of both, because a free market climate activist would say, just put the price, market fixes it. It will actually fix it, but at a tremendous social cost. So we need something in addition, which also to make sure that individuals and companies and sectors are able to transition early to be the winners of tomorrow. Because I think the people who would win in the economy are those who get it, and where is sort of the 21st century economy, rather than to trying to cling to the 20th. So I'm very optimistic. It's a great report, and I've read it, and I look forward to listening to the debate.
Thank you so much, Espen Barth Eide, Minister of Climate and Environment from Norway. And now we move over to Sweden. Annika Strandhell, Minister of Climate and the Environment, please.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. Nice to see all of you, and of course, especially also my Nordic colleagues. Great that we could all be here. Well, the climate transition needs companies, it needs countries, it needs people with the courage to be pioneers. Pioneers in innovative technology, smart policies, and showing actually that the transition can ultimately enable a higher quality of life and standard. The Nordic countries have the potential and preconditions to show ambitious leadership in tackling the climate change, both internationally and at home. By working together, as we heard also the Norwegian ministers say, on multiple arenas, international within the EU, and through the regional Nordic cooperation, we can inspire more countries to follow and bring out the greatest transformation in our societies since industrialization. The climate neutral society must also be a welfare society, which requires both economic and technological developments. And of course, they are to a large extent also driven by businesses. It's very encouraging to see how the report outlines the opportunities business leaders see with the climate transition and the broad support for ambitious climate action. I welcome the results from the report, and I would like to thank everyone involved in this important work. The report shows that businesses and business leaders indeed want to contribute ambitiously to reach the 1.5 degree target. These results are very encouraging, since you are all representing also important Nordic companies from different parts of Nordic business sector, and thus play also a crucial role in our efforts to deal with the climate change and its impact. The far-reaching goals established in Paris, within the EU, and in our respective nations can't be reached without your active participation and your leadership, since you are the ones that are developing the technologies and the solutions that makes the goals achievable. I also feel very inspired by the fact that the responses in the report challenges the idea that sometimes limits the international discussions on climate change, that high climate ambition hamper economic development. Tackling climate change needs optimism. That's my firm belief. To see your reasoning on business opportunities in the climate transition is encouraging, but it is also much needed. Already today, we are witnessing the power of the industrial transformation in Sweden. I think that some of the key enablers for this can be summarized actually into 3 Fs: framework, financing, and friends. When it comes to framework, Sweden decided in 2017 to be the first fossil-free welfare nation by 2045 at the latest. Our climate policy framework sets the direction implementing the Paris Agreement nationally. If we are going to say something about financing, it is a key to show that there is a business case in moving forward to a fossil-free industry, and through this also attract investments. Sweden invests in the industry transition on a national level through the investment fund, the Industrial Leap, but also on an international level. Well, I want to say something about friends as well. The Swedish government has initiated the platform Fossil Free Sweden, as my Norwegian colleague mentioned, which works also very closely with the private sector and the civil society to create sectoral roadmaps to plan for the transition towards net zero emissions. We have already prominent examples from Sweden of how our roadmaps have been a part in enabling the transition towards net zero emissions, creating new jobs in northern Sweden, not to say the least, but also boosting competitiveness. One such example is Hybrid, a collaboration with the goal of developing a fossil-free steel. Constructive collaboration along the value chain between public and private actors has been a key enabler to start this world unique project that it actually is. I am convinced that public-private partnership is a key in facilitating an ambitious climate transition. At the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019, Sweden and India, together with the World Economic Forum, launched a leadership group for the industry transition, Lead It. Lead It was launched to tackle one of the toughest climate challenges ahead of us by leading the transition of heavy industry and pursue efforts to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. It is clear that in order to fulfill high climate change ambitions, the business community needs to cooperation with the public domain, the civil society, and of course, the government.
Thank you. We need to wrap up.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you so much, Annika, and sorry for interrupting you. We need to move on. And that was Annika Strandhell, Minister of Climate and Environment from Sweden. And now we move over to Finland. Emma Kari, Minister of the Environment and Climate Change in Finland, please.
Thank you so much, Nina, and thank you for organizing this fantastic event. I hope next time we can all meet face to face, but for now we're stuck here online. But anyway, good to see you. And Happy New Year to all my colleagues and all my Nordic friends. It's a lovely snowy day here in Helsinki, and I hope you have enjoyed the fantastic and beautiful winter holidays. First, congratulations to Climate Leadership Coalition, Haga Initiative, Skift, and all other contributors for the publication of this report. As my colleagues who spoke wisely before me said, this report and the Climate Neutral Nordic project, they are both important demonstrations of both Nordic cooperation and public-private cooperation in practice. As everyone here knows, Nordic countries are climate leaders. We all have ambitious climate policy targets, and we are taking determined actions to meet them. Finland aims to be climate neutral by the year 2035, and we're working hard all across all sectors to reach this goal. And as we all know, another thing we all Nordics share is cooperation between governments and business life. As my colleague from Sweden said, also in Finland, key ministries have developed sectoral low carbon roadmaps together with our energy intensive industries such as energy, chemicals, forestry, and technology industries. 10 other industries such as the textile industry and constructions have also developed similar roadmaps. These roadmaps are an important element in our work towards climate neutrality, and they provide information on the emission reduction potential in each sector, inform climate and energy policies, and show the industry's commitment to our common climate action. Dear friends, Nordic companies have demonstrated that they can provide climate solutions for global markets. I believe the Nordic countries can and should provide an even stronger development platform for those solutions. Also in Finland, we have developed this concept called the carbon handprint. That means the positive climate effect of a product or service. In our future climate strategies, we will take the handprint opportunities into use when doing major climate policy decisions. This way we can also illustrate how smart climate policies can attract investments, create new jobs and exports, and enhance public support for ambitious climate action. Important factors to support the green transition are to create the demand for new climate-friendly products and secure that the infrastructure, especially the energy infrastructure, is in good shape. As my colleague from Norway says, everyone is talking about hydrogen. The renewable hydrogen economy needs much more than we have today. But I warmly welcome new initiatives and ideas to develop joint Nordic markets for green and sustainable products and services. We must also ensure that the availability of clean energy resources and that the permitting processes work smoothly. As everyone here knows, the era of fossil fuels is over. But dear friends, I look forward to seeing the work under this project progress. I wish you all the best of success, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma Kari, Minister of the Environment and Climate Change in Finland. So let's move over to Iceland. Guðlaugur Þórðarson, Minister of the Environment, Energy and Climate, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you, dear friends. You will maybe learn in due time to pronounce my name, but I doubt it though. I haven't met anyone outside Iceland yet who has been able to do so, but maybe it will happen. But I'm very pleased to be here. This is my first meeting as a minister of this new minister in Iceland, because as you maybe know, then the same coalition is still keeping track after the election. And for the first time in Icelandic history, we have the environment, energy and climate in one ministry, and I am very proud to steer that ship. I am very pleased that we are here together and also very pleased with this report. And we all know that a key sector in the fight against climate change is the private sector. And I am a firm believer in the power of individual and business for innovation and providing solutions. I think that we can see many good examples of this in our Nordic region. And I am encouraged to see that Northern CEOs are showing leadership in climate solutions. In Iceland, the private sector has pioneered many clean solutions. Companies have, in cooperation with the government, formed a platform called Green by Iceland in order to promote the export of Icelandic green solutions and renewable energy expertise. We are keen to use this platform to promote a climate-friendly transformation in Iceland as well. We need to harness the energy and know-how of the private sector, and we need to ensure that business and policymakers understand each other and act in coordination. I believe Iceland has a good story to tell, as well as the other Nordic countries. Our past clean energy conversion was achieved by not only an abundance of renewable energy, but also by determined efforts of scientists, engineers, policymakers, and private actors. We accumulated a lot of experience and know-how, not least in the field of geothermal energy, and Iceland is now an exporter of geothermal expertise. The export of know-how in this field may have resulted in more climate mitigation in a global context than any other action or policy. One byproduct which I want to draw your attention to this geothermal expertise, is Carpex. And what is Carpex? It is a carbon capture method that takes carbon dioxide from geothermal steam and pumps it underground, where it's crystallized into minerals. Now, this technique has been applied to catch CO2 directly from the atmosphere. The world's largest direct air capture facility in the world to date was opened up in Hellisheiði last autumn. Innovation is a gift that keeps on giving. In the report we are launching, one Icelandic CEO is quoted. He says climate change is a grave threat to humanity, but then he adds, but as a company, we see as an opportunity. And someone could ask, how can that be possible? But that is what we are facing. This is, of course, to a grave concern. This is probably the biggest task we are facing at the moment. But at the same time, we also, like one of my colleagues mentioned, to look this in to be optimistic and look at the opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guðlaugur Þórðarson, and great that you mentioned Carpex as well, and you can read more about it in the report. I just want to say thank you, Espen Barth Eide, Annika Strandhell, Emma Kari, and Guðlaugur Þórðarson. I will really try to pronounce your name right. I have to work on it. Thank you. It's great to see 4 ministers, probably for the first time, at least this year, and because several of you are new. So great, and thank you for collaboration with business and your leadership, climate leadership. Thank you so much. So let's move over and hear the CEOs and the business perspective. And we will start with Søren Skou. He's the CEO of the big shipping company, Maersk. Please.
Yes, thank you, Nina, and thanks for having me. As you said, I'm the CEO of Maersk, and Maersk is a global logistics and shipping company. We operate more than 700 ships in a global network, hundreds of warehouses, 75 ports in the world. Almost 20% of all containers that move around in the world are moved on our network, and that means that we are a big CO2 emitter. Actually, we emit more CO2 as a company than the state of Denmark does. Of course, because we are such a big part of global trade. In 2018, we decided, we set out a target to become carbon neutral in 2050. At the time, we didn't have much actually real idea of how that was going to happen. But now, 3 years later, we actually understand the pathway to carbon neutrality for shipping. And we have done a lot in the last 3 years. We have launched our first carbon neutral products, transportation products based on biofuel. We have ordered our first 12 full-size container ships that are under construction that will use green fuels. We have found our first supply contract for green fuels, and we are committed to this year set targets for our whole company in line with science-based targets for the 1.5 degree pathway. So a lot is going on. Now, this decade for global transportation and certainly for global shipping, we believe that the main constraint will actually be access to green fuel. We will need a lot of ramp up on renewable energy to produce it using power to X, hydrogen, and then into first methanol and maybe later, most likely later into ammonia that we can use as a fuel in the ships. It is a really good news that we have the ability to produce green fuels from renewable power. The fact that we can find a liquid to replace the oil we use today, a product that is a liquid at an ambient temperature, means that we can use the engines we have, or at least the concept of a combustion engine. We don't have to renew all our 700 ships. Maybe we can retrofit in the future. We see, of course, that this is an investment game, it's a cost game, but it's also actually a market opportunity. Our largest customers are starting to demand carbon neutral transport. And before the COP26 8 of our largest customers, with IKEA, with Unilever, with Amazon in the lead, all said that they would demand 100% carbon neutral logistics solutions by 2040. So we are also growing towards a market demand. This market demand is probably going to drive all of the growth that we're going to see in carbon neutral logistics solutions this decade. But towards the end of this decade, for sure, we're going to need your help in terms of getting a carbon tax in place on global shipping. Because at some point, we will not have more customers with big brands to protect. We will have customers that will look at this only as a cost. Global shipping has one huge advantage. It's regulated by the IMO. And why is that an advantage? It's an advantage because it allows global regulation of a whole industry. So whatever the IMO decides will happen. That means that we can do a carbon tax, decide what fuels to use. The big problem, of course, with IMO is it's United Nations. There's 184 members, and many have very different views on this agenda. But this is really where we need the regulators, politicians to help us get the right regulation for this sector. It's possible to decarbonize global shipping. We have the pathway, and right now, I think we are at the beginning of a decarbonization that will happen over 20 years. We can do it from a technology perspective. We can also afford it. And I simply ask your help in terms of regulation, predominantly through the IMO. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Søren Skou, CEO of Maersk. So let's move over to Remi Eriksen, Group President and CEO of DNV. Please.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share our perspectives on the energy transition. Let me first say a few words about DNV to give you some context. DNV was formed in 1864 as a classification society with a purpose to safeguard life, property, and the environment. DNV is owned by a foundation, the Norske Veritas, and today provides risk management and assurance services. We have our roots in the maritime industry, which still is a very important part of what we do. But over the years, we have also expanded into other risk-intense industries like energy, healthcare, ICT, and food and beverage. A few years back, we established an energy transition program, which every year produces science-based forecasts of the energy transition, including reports on how we can manage to stay below 1.5 degrees of global warming. What our research clearly shows is that everything that can be electrified must be electrified fast. And the world is progressing quite well here. But what must really be accelerated is zero carbon solutions for the hard to abate sectors, like Søren Skou just said, like aviation, shipping, heavy duty trucking, and high heat manufacturing processes. Currently, these sectors, these so-called hard to abate sectors, are responsible for around 35% of global energy-related emissions. Another very important finding from our research is that zero emissions in 2050 for many countries is not enough. And that is because twice the might, many developed or developing nations and hard to abate sectors will not be able to achieve zero emissions by 2050. This means that high-income nations and easy to electrify sectors must go below zero before 2050, meaning taking more out of the atmosphere than putting into it. There is no doubt that high-income countries like the Nordic countries cannot be complacent here and must lead with early, meaningful action. Norway, small as it is, has shown leadership in electrical vehicles, accelerating their uptake domestically and also globally. We must search for other similar points of leverage, which do exist within offshore wind, particularly offshore floating wind, hydrogen, carbon capture and storage, as well as decarbonized maritime fuels. So what needs to be done on a political level? Basically everything. Governments must use the entire toolbox. This includes incentivizing innovation and piloting, subsidizing nascent industries, using carbon taxes, mandates, bans, efficiency standards, as well as public purchasing power to drive green solution. As an example, for Europe to reach net zero by 2042, according to our forecast, the report points to a carbon price of $250 per ton by 2050. Another example, going back in time to 2015, when Norwegian Parliament decided that all new public ferries should have low or zero emission technologies on board. Using its purchasing power, the government triggered scaling of new technologies, and now Norway leads the way with 1/4 of its ferries electrified. Everybody, individuals, companies, and countries need to lift what they can if we are to have any real chance at not only turning the tide, but also turning it on time. The good news is that we know what we must do to accelerate the energy transition. The world has the technology to make it happen. The question is, will the world act boldly? I don't know, but what I can assure you, however, that we at DNV will redouble our efforts to reduce our own emissions as a service company and work with our customers and partners to transition faster. And together, we certainly can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Remi Eriksson, Group President and CEO of DNV. Thank you. So let's move over to Hannu Keininen, President and CEO of Ensto. Please.
Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to be today with you here, as well as it was great pleasure to participate in the interviews and be part of the report. Hey, I'm going to take you through shortly what is how important is electricity, and I'm sharing you first couple of pictures, sharing the pictures, what is the impact of electricity to the world and our lives. And in here you can see the 5 pairs of the pictures, what in a lower part would be without electricity, and upper part is with electricity. So what would be the daily life, cooking, what would be the modern societies without electricity? What would be the equality in our society without electricity? How would the cities be without electricity? We have heard this already today, that how the electrification of the vehicles and traffic impacts the local pollution, for example. How can electricity, how it has removed the need to do the boring routine housework and giving time for the education and studies. How are the modern societies built with the infrastructure? Of course, the modern communication technology, and of course, very basics like cooking, storing the food, and having sufficient light. All of that is enabled by electricity, and that's not all. Electricity plays a very important role in preventing a climate change. And solution is very simple. We need to stop burning fossil fuels and replace that with the renewable fossil-free, carbon dioxide-free electricity. But there comes the trick. We know that most or many of these renewable sources actually are depending on the weather, depending on the wind, and so on. So therefore, the smart element comes into the picture. How can we utilize those renewable sources? And there the, let's say, smart electricity comes into the picture. Ensto is a family-owned company, Finnish company, working in an area of electrification. Our main customers are the distribution system operators, which means electricity distribution. We are Nordic company. We are making product services, solutions for distributing the electricity in overhead line networks, in underground networks, increasingly for network automation, and all of those new smart technologies are in the key. What I want to talk about today is the carbon handprint. Of course, we, as many other companies, we do our utmost and best when it comes to our own footprint. Of course, we have a targets for the scope 1 and 2, how we reduce our own operations footprint, how we reduce the impact of our manufacturing process, how we select aluminium and materials which are made with as low as possible footprint of the carbon. But I would say that most important part is the carbon handprint, because this has a global impact and it can be a global business. And Nordic countries have many companies. I'm proud to present today Ensto, but many other companies with solutions, products, services to prevent climate change or slow down global warming with smart electricity. And that can happen beyond Nordic countries. Just a few examples: building renewable electricity, building energy storages, whether those are battery or hydrogen, etc., building load management, controlling the usage and moving the consumption of electricity to the moments when the sun shines or wind blows. And all of these above examples are speeding up, replacing fossil fuels by renewable carbon dioxide-free electricity. But what is needed? Of course, it is the operating environment. What is needed? Of course, our own home markets, Nordics, should be kind of laboratories, should be forerunners in deploying those smart elements of electricity. We certainly need effective price and cost for the carbon, not only in the Nordics, but also beyond the Nordic countries, to give a payback for those investments which are needed. For example, battery storage. Example from our own factory from Porvoo, we have 150 kilowatt peak power plant. For solar plant, we have 100 kilowatt hours battery system where we can participate for the frequency market, as an example, to preventing burning fossil fuels. Education and research for electricity, and especially in smart electricity, and naturally support and subsidies and operating environment for companies like Ensto. And I firmly believe that Nordics could become a superpower of electricity and smart electricity. Thank you very much for your attention, and it was great to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannu Keininen, President and CEO of Ensto. So let's move over to Jan Moström, President and CEO of LKAB.
Thank you.
So please.
Thank you very much. Today, the main product in LKAB is iron ore pellets. If you mine iron ore underground at the depth of approximately 1,400 meters, you must have a competitive advantage over the mining companies that mine their ore at surface in large-scale open pits. You must also deliver value to customers through premium products. We adopted a new strategy in 2019. Instead of producing iron ore pellets, we shift to direct reduced iron, DRI, also known as Spong iron, by developing a CO2-free process. In addition to iron, all iron ore contains about 1/4 of oxygen. For more than 2,000 years, coal has been used in blast furnaces to remove the oxygen from the iron. The result is iron and CO2. The steel industry accounts for about 7% of global CO2 emissions today. In Sweden, this figure is about 10%. This corresponds to about 1/3 of all industrial CO2 emissions in Sweden. Our direction is to eliminate CO2 from the value chain from mine to finished steel. This will be accomplished throughout several development programs. The first is to create a new world standard for mining at great depth. Operations that are digitalized, autonomous, electrified, and CO2-free. This is taking place in a dedicated experimental mine, Konsum, close to the Kiruna mine, and the findings are integrated stepwise into our mining operations. In parallel with this, are we conducting a program to replace carbon as a mean of removing oxygen from the iron ore. Together with the Swedish steel producer SSAB and the Swedish energy company Vattenfall, have we developed a method that will replace the blast furnace with a process called direct reduction. The process, which has been in use for some 50 years, normally employs natural gas with a limited reduction of CO2. Instead, we use clean hydrogen as the reducing agent to remove the oxygen. And then we have the result of iron and water. A prerequisite for making this process CO2-free is that we are using electricity produced from renewable sources. The first hydrogen-reduced steel produced in our pilot plant in Luleå has been produced and delivered to a customer. That was a small sample for the purpose of testing the quality of the material. We have begun industrialization of this process, and by 2026, the first plant will be up and running. By 2040, 2045 at the latest, all LKAB production will shift to CO2-free DRI. When the transition has been realized, LKAB will reduce CO2 emissions from our own operations and those of our customers by 35 million tons annually and globally. We calculate that we will be able to achieve this with improved profitability and strengthened competitive advantage. We are also working with circularity. In our beneficiation plant, eliminate waste rock including the mineral apatite from the ore. This residual waste ends up in piles or tailing ponds today. Apatite is a phosphate mineral and a carrier of rare earth elements, REE. Our direction is to extract the apatite instead of depositing it into the tailing ponds. Waste will be upgraded to valuable strategic raw materials such as mineral fertilizers and REE. When we have established a process for extracting REE concentrates, it corresponds to approximately 30% of European present demand and perhaps the entire demand for elements for permanent magnets. One might ask whether there are any obstacles to this development. Yes, as was previously mentioned by Annika, are increasingly complicated permitting processes one, and access to electricity from renewable energy sources over time another. We estimate that we alone will need more than 50 terawatt hours for our transition over time. And I would say that we in the industry are prepared, but we need engaged and pragmatic policymakers to be successful on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan Moström, President and CEO LKAB. And I want to thank you to all your business leaders, Søren Skou, Maersk, Rem Eriksson, DNV, Hannu Keininen, Ensto, and Jan Moström, LKAB. And thank you also for your fantastic support to the report. That was really, really valuable and important. So thank you so much. So let's move over to the Nordic business networks and the concluding remarks. And I will hand over to my colleague in Norway first, Bjørn K. Haugland. He's the CEO of Shift Business Climate Leaders in Norway. Please. Great, we need a sound.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for all these inspiring reflections. I think Espen Barth Eide said it is a race from low to no emission. And I think we are also fortunate being part of the Nordic region with the inspiring vision to be the most sustainable and integrated region in the world. And Annika Strandhell, you mentioned the principles we can work through with frameworks, finance, and maybe most important, friendship. because I think that is the power in our region. And from our side, we strongly believe that a price on carbon really is important to accelerate this transition. So my concluding call to action is let 2022 be the year of act more than talk. Let's together fill the Nordic vision with real climate solution. And when the rest of the world look at the Nordic countries, and they should think about climate solution, and when it comes to climate solution, they should say, look to the Nordic. Thank you so much for the collaboration.
Thank you so much, Björn Haugland. So let's move from Norway to Finland and to Joni Keronen, who is the CEO of the Climate Leadership Coalition in Finland. So please, Joni.
Thank you, Nina. So dear ministers and business leaders, I have 4 points for today's meeting. At first, about this carbon handprint that has been mentioned several times today. So maybe it's not familiar to all of you. The handprint is basically the reduction of the customer's carbon footprint by using less carbon-intensive materials, less waste, less carbon-intensive energy, or increasing lifetime and performance of a product, or increasing carbon capture and storage. And if you are more interested in this topic, there is a guide, a carbon handprint guide done by VTT and Lund University. And we already will have a soon guide published for the cities and regions how they can speed up the development. Then the other point is that these demand-based policies are very important, because quite often, like we know in Finland, when we created the quotas for biofuels, then they created the market and the first biorefineries, and after that it has been very successful business case internationally. So we can use carbon footprint in public and private procurement much more proactively, using quotas for climate-friendly products, like, for example, carbon-free steel and others. Then using more services. So the more services we use, then it promotes the circularity effectively. And then use carbon contracts for differences to enable the profitability for the forerunners. And then carbon pricing has been also mentioned in the report as a key tool. So we actually started to work on this carbon pricing with Nina and Björn already like 2 years ago, established the Call on Carbon initiative that is now the world's largest climate business initiative globally. And it has been signed by more than 130 parties representing over 60 million companies, over 25 trillion USD market cap, or 120 trillion worth of assets, and covers about 100 countries. So if you have not heard of it, please check the website, and we would appreciate if you would like to join the call. And finally, the Nordic way is really matters. It's respected internationally. The latest recognition what we have got was that the Pope Francis published the book Laudato Si Reader, how the Laudato Si is influencing around the world. And we got an honor to write a chapter on the business side, how this Nordic leaders are behaving in a really respectful or trustworthy, sustainable way relating to climate issues.
Joni.
So thank you. This was my 4 points.
Thank you so much, Joni. This was a fantastic manifestation of Nordic enterprise and political will that show a strong commitment achieving carbon neutrality. To the world, I would like to say, policy together with business are prepared and want to manifest that the Nordic show leadership to reach the ambitious goals set by the global community and was emphasized at the COP26 in Glasgow. We all know we need to do a tremendous effort internationally. I want to say to you, the Nordics are ready. The companies are already on the playing field, and a forceful wave on investments and technological innovations are already here, and a strong will between business and governments to solve the climate crisis is happening right now. As the business are pointing out in the report, we need a high price on carbon, we need commitment, and we need action. We hope that the world notes this strong Nordic leadership. That is, we can see in this report and what we have heard in this webinar. And we hope that can inspire and also lead to action. We are determined, and I hope you are. I want to say thank you to all the speakers and to all the contributors to the report. And thank you to all that have been listening here today. Please help us share this message. I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you.